veteran or on active service right now. I do want to start with thanking you for volunteering with the intent to serve a country that you thought cared about you. Happy one day belated Veterans Day to my brothers and even my sisters in arms. Equal opportunity. Embrace diversity. Dignity and respect for all. If you had to guess if this mug came from a UC Berkeley professor's desk or an elite war-fighting command structure, which would you guess? I would have said that it came from the professor's desk too. But the truth is, it's a U.S. Army Special Operations Command mug. The same. This is the mug that I kept on my desk for a couple of years. And I always left the front facing out because it looks real cool, and the back faced me to remind me of why I needed to not re-enlist. It's ironic that an organization with the motto, Sine Pari, forgive me for the Latin, that means without equal. So it's ironic that an organization with the motto, without equal, pushes diversity over merit on its nearly all-white force. I was going to throw the mug, but it's like the perfect size. It's a good mug. How do we know that elite military organizations are overwhelmingly white? Well, they tell us. A Rand Corporation study from 1999. Are there barriers to minorities joining special operations forces? The study found yes. The real answer is standards. But USA Today from 2015, the Pentagon's elite forces lack diversity. ABC in 2021, the U.S. military's elite commando forces look to expand diversity. From the Military Times in 2021, Special Operations Command, SOCOM, committing itself to attracting more women and people of color. Not to leave gender out of our progressive stack, my favorite article related to gender inclusivity, that's hard to say, for combat roles, Marine Corps study, all male combat units outperformed better than mixed units. That was published by the NPR in 2015. The results were, of course, sexist and fascist, all male units outperforming mixed units in 69% of tasks. For at least 23 years, longer than some of you that are here tonight have even been alive, the military has attempted to diversify its best units. The results? As of March 2021, a full 95% of SEAL and combatant craft crew officers were white. Just 2% were black, according to Naval Special Warfare statistics. The Officer Corps of Army Special Forces is 87% white and again 2% black. Why would an organization supposedly based on merit and standards have an issue with its best and its brightest being overwhelmingly white and male? January 6th, 2021, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by the current and former armed forces of the Empire of America. Thank you, FDR, for the Pearl Harbor quote. Researchers have identified at least 140 defendants. That's 17% of January 6th attackers with a military background. The identities of former high-ranking military officers who went to the Capitol on January 6th have become publicly known. People like Air Force Lieutenant Colonel retired Rendell Brock Jr., Army Colonel retired and Information Warfare Specialist Phil Waldron, and retired Navy SEAL Adam Newbold. From superiority to supremacy, exploring the vulnerability of military and police special forces to extreme right radicalization. That is a research paper that was published earlier this year, and it argues that a lack of diversity in gender and ethnicity, elite warrior subcultures, echo chambers, and cognitive rigidity can become vulnerability factors for extreme right radicalization in military and police special forces units. We're supposed to believe that the most intelligent and capable warfighters in the history of man became right-wing extremists by brainwashing each other and excluding women. We're supposed to believe that these men are all incels. We fought. The truth is, these men are smart enough to see the world for what it is. They operate in an all-white force, or mostly white force. And that leads to political whiteness, that leads to agreeing with each other, and that leads to a realistic outlook on how the world works and what you're doing in the world. That scares the shit out of our enemies. In 2012. In 2015, I signed into an aviation special operations unit at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I worked with these men, I know these men, and I still talk to them. One of these men, Staff Sergeant Kyle R. McKee, died on this day, the 12th of November, 2 years ago, flying on an Egyptian-Israeli peacekeeping mission on the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. Kyle and I met when he came to my unit a few months after that. Sorry. Kyle and I met a few months after I signed into my unit. Kyle gave me the vibe, if you know what I mean. Turns out we listened to the same podcasts, we read the same books. He was our guy. I knew Kyle's family, and Kyle knew my family. At the time of his death, he had 2 sons and a newborn daughter born literally days before he left for Egypt. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine signed House Bill 291 on the 22nd of April of this year, 2022, renaming part of State Route 86 to Staff Sergeant Kyle R. McKee Memorial Highway. And I guess that's better than growing up with a dad, right? A quote from Ohio Democratic State Representative Daniel Troy. Staff Sergeant Kyle McKee is a hero who died protecting everything we as Americans cherish. Mr. Troy, I don't know many Americans who cherish positive Egyptian-Israeli relations, but I can think of a few policymakers who do. Jewish neocon Richard Pearl, along with Middle East policy advisor to George W. Bush David Wurmser, another Jew, published A Clean Break, a new strategy for securing the realm. This was published by the Institute for Advanced Strategic Studies in Israel in 1996. The realm that they're referring to is Israel. One year later, the Project for a New American Century was founded by Richard Pearl, in America, of course. A few years later, we invaded Iraq over supposed weapons of mass destruction that, funnily enough, never materialized. Listen to Chairman Paynovich's speech, A New Clean Break, for a detailed history and who's who of clean break in American foreign policy in the Middle East. So most of us here are no longer on active service. That is a problem for the Jewish power structure. We have radicalized veterans here among us with specific skills running around without any sort of check on their activities. That's where Jewish veteran Christopher Goldsmith and Task Force Butler come in. Task Force Butler was founded in early 2022 with the stated intent of, quote, not to harm those who have fallen sway to misinformation and radicalization, but to encourage them to leave a path that exclusively leads to their destruction, end quote. It's funny that they want to bully people away from a path that leads to their destruction while leading you down the Jewish-led path that leads to your destruction. How do they plan on convincing fellow veterans to step off the path of enlightenment? Social and financial pain. And that's from their website, social and financial pain. But remember, they don't want to punish you. That's not a punishment. They're just doxing and blacklisting you.
Anti-white.
It is anti-white. So what has Task Force Butler been up to? In 2022, Mr. Goldsmith's organization has doxed individuals who aren't even veterans, looking to meet up with other pro-white individuals. They have accused Patriot Front of a nationwide conspiracy to be mean to black people. And they illegally spied on a private nationalist event in Texas. A so-called operator from Task Force Butler used lies and misinformation to gain access to this nationalist event. Other members of Task Force Butler then used a drone to spy on this event, which was held on private property. They were not invited. They logged people's license plates. They recorded people without their permission. And then they turned all of that information over to law enforcement. Task Force Butler is a non-profit organization, which means that it is paid for by your tax dollars. It openly works with Antifa and federal law enforcement. If you scroll Christopher Goldsmith and Task Force Butler's Twitter, you see them interacting with Antifa openly. They're not hiding it. This confirms our narrative that Antifa and the federal government are one and the same. Why does the government need a seemingly respectable front for their illicit information laundering schemes? It's simple. People think that that type of behavior is corrupt and scummy. Regular people hate Antifa. Goldsmith seeks to bridge the gap between normal people and the immoral harassment of people for practicing their First Amendment rights. The creation of Task Force Butler begs a few questions. Why do so many veterans hate the government? After signing up to defend America, people come to the realization that they're not doing that at all. How many rights did Kyle protect over Sinai? What sacred and God-given right is hidden in that Afghani poppy field? It's funny that if you ask anybody why they re-enlisted, why they continue to serve in the United States military, they'll tell you, I do it for the men to my left and my right. When you enlisted in the military, how many brothers in arms did you have? How many people were fighting to your left and your right? Zero. Zero. Nobody joins the military in order to fight for the people to their left and their right. People stay in the military for those people. At some point, all of us realized that we were lied to. We got worked. We were a mark. Our European instincts to defend our people and seek glory for our nation were used to serve Israel. They were hijacked. Nobody can deny that that is what the global war on terror was fought over at this point. While you're serving, you have to sit through equal opportunity classes that tell you that discrimination is bad as long as the recipient is a non-white. They never talk about the discrimination against whites that happens at a systematic and strategic level within the military. You also have to receive indoctrination to ensure that you are pro-tranny enough. And after enough TBIs, you might even decide that you're no longer the Navy SEAL Christopher Beck, but you're Kristen Beck. I might never have my Navy SEAL trident, but I'll always have the tip of my spear. So why would so many red-blooded, God-fearing Americans attend a mostly peaceful protest like January 6th? Well, in addition to being subjected to discrimination in the authority of an organization that hates you and seeks to destroy your people, you see that the rights that you thought that you were defending, the rights that you hold sacred, are not being respected, and in fact, they're being actively taken away from you. Our right to free speech, our right to representation, our right to accessible elections, and our right to bear arms are all under attack.
Right.
I did not sign up to fight and die for this nation, only to have my sacrifices spat on by the reigning Jewish elite. We've all watched our friends bleed out and die in foreign lands, and I ask you, what was it all for? But then, the day finally comes. Expiration of terms of service. You separate from the military. You get your DD-214. Member 1 and Member 4, make copies, never hand out your original. You're done. Now, you get to work with the Department of Veterans Affairs, a delightful and efficient organization with no history of abuse or neglect. The VA's opioid safety initiative, remember, no neglect. The VA's opioid safety initiative reduced the number of patients receiving opioids and benzodiazepines together by 87% since 2012, from nearly 300,000 down to nearly 16,000 veterans, as well as reducing the number of patients on long-term opioid medications by 70%, and the number of patients on very high doses of opioids by 80%. So many veterans are on opioids that I can't even read that sentence in two breaths. 1 in 10 veterans have been diagnosed with a substance abuse disorder, higher than the civilian average. A big problem in the VA, or with veterans in general, is they are diagnosed with a substance abuse disorder for alcohol, something the VA does not prescribe you. Why are veterans turning to alcohol? Why? Because they can't get medical care. They can't get the care that they need. The VA is finally making an attempt to reduce the amount of opioids that they hand out. But they still can't get a handle on the time it takes to assist veterans or the abuse that veterans face while in the care of the VA. June 26, 2018, John Watts, a 58-year-old Air Force veteran, he set himself on fire outside of the Georgia Capitol building in Atlanta. He was protesting his treatment at the hands of the VA. November 15th, 2017, Charles Ingram, a 51-year-old Air Force veteran, committed suicide by setting himself on fire outside of a New Jersey VA facility. The VA had failed to see him for over a year before he took his own life. He needed care that was not within the VA network. It got approved, and nobody ever called him to tell him that it got approved. So he could not schedule the appointment that he needed. The veteran suicide rate is 1.5 times higher than the suicide rate for civilians. Around 20 veterans a day commit suicide, and 3/4 of those veterans are not in the care of the VA. What's wrong with the VA? Why can't they manage to take care of the people who have served the interests of our ruling class? Conservatives will tell you that the problem is socialism. Conservatives don't have an answer for the relatively efficient and effective socialist healthcare system that is available to active duty service members. The real answer is that once you're done serving the interests of the wealthy elites in Israel, they don't care about you. They don't care if you commit suicide. In fact, they probably prefer it because that's one less veteran they have to worry about getting pissed off at how they're treated. So I asked Mr. Goldsmith, and I asked his organization, Task Force Butler, do you really think harassing and attempting to financially ruin us is a good idea? The truth is that they don't care if it's a good idea or not. They know what might happen if we walk away with our military training, but not the proper indoctrination. How many steps away are we from barring white men from the military entirely, or at least largely from limiting their ability to perform integral roles within the military? Our masters look at it this way because our masters fear the guillotine of unbridled white rage and solidarity combined with the skills that we acquired in the military. The National Justice Party does not want to corrupt our most elite military institutions with diversity and other anti-white ideological bullshit. We do not want to send our best and our brightest off to fight and die under false pretenses. Lastly, we believe in taking care of those who have answered the call and stood up to fight for our people. I don't want to see any more of my friends dead in a ditch, dead on foreign soil, or in jail for theft in order to fuel their VA-prescribed heroin addiction.